So we're on Ches Amud Beis on the bottom. Where is that? Tanya, about 5 lines up. So the Gemara just talked about that Yovel goes from Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara said it's not simple because there is a Rabbanan that say everything starts from Yom Kippur when they blow the shofar. And we said the other day that the Gemara is not talking about the fact that you're not allowed to work on the karka. That's the same as Shemitah, that it starts from continues into there's not a 10-day break. Shemitah the 49th year, and then again the 50th year goes straight in. But the issue was about the extra halachas about Yovel, which are that you send away the avadim free, and the karka goes back to the original owners. So when does that happen? So there is a Rabbanan that say that it all happens from Yom Kippur, but our Mishnah holds like Rabbi Shmuel ben Moshe ben Broka, that it comes in slowly. And those 10 days is someplace in between, which would mean that the avadim don't work anymore, but they don't go home. And as the Rishonim also say, as far as the karkos, yesterday I wasn't sure about the karkos, but also the same thing, that the buyer who's been eating the karka since he bought it, so he has to stop eating it. He can't continue eating the karka, eating the peros, but the seller doesn't get it back yet until after Yom Kippur. Means he can't eat the peros either. So for 10 days, no one's eating the peros. And that's our Mishnah that says that something does start from Rosh Hashanah, even though the Gemara happens on Yom Kippur when they blow the shofar, but some things it does come in slowly. The first 10 days, the avadim stop working, and also the buyer stops eating the peros from the karka that he had bought. And now the Gemara continues, about 5 lines up, Tanya, last one on the line, Tanya. Tanya idach, yovel hi, ma tamud loma. Besides the pasuk that says that you sanctify the 50th year, it also says yovel hi, it is yovel, which is a miyut. It's coming to exclude and say, to minimize something. And it's coming to say that only the 50th year. What is the chiddush of that? Ma tamud loma. Why does it have to have such a pasuk to say that? The fishinam b'v'kedashim mishnasa chamishim shana, shnasa chamishim, yachol kishem shemiskadeshes v'lachas b'tchilasa, kach miskadeshes v'lachas b'sofa. You might think the fact that it comes in slowly. Yovel starts, we could say, on Yom Kippur, but really the first 10 days, it comes in slowly. Like we said, that the avadim stop working, the peros also are not eaten by the buyer anymore. So you might think the same way that it comes in slowly, also it leaves slowly. And it's going to continue even after Rosh Hashanah. It'll continue more. Rashi says also till Yom Kippur. Maybe on the 51st year, also Yovel's not over for another 10 days. There's going to be an extension of Yovel, just like it started a bit early, that it started coming in slowly from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. Maybe it also is going to leave slowly from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur on the 51st year. And even though that sounds surprising, don't be surprised at that. That's the possible concept. We do find in other places there's such a concept as adding on from the mundane to the holy, as we're going to talk about soon. We know that concept by Shabbos and by Yom Kippur. We'll see soon that happens by Shemitah also. We'll talk about it. So there is such a concept out there of most of Mechol HaKodesh. Maybe here also that the Yovel will go into the 51st year. That's why he says Yovel hi, Tamud loma Yovel hi, Shnasa Chamishim Atam Mekadesh, V'Atam Mekadesh Shnasa Chamishim V'achas. The reason why the pasuk has to say Yovel hi is to say only the 50th year, not the 51st year. It doesn't go into the 51st year at all, even though in the beginning of the Yovel it does have a 10-day period which it gets stronger and stronger until Yom Kippur. But when it leaves by Rosh Hashanah, and it doesn't go into the 51st year at all. The top of the page, Rabbanan, they said that nothing happens from Rosh Hashanah. They argued on Rabbi Shmuel ben Moshe, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. They said nothing happens from the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. The whole thing of Yovel kicks in on Yom Kippur. Those first 10 days, the avadim still have to work, and the buyer still eats the karka as he did till now. So according to them, Rashi explains that there's no reason to have a pasuk to say that there's no continuation into the 51st year. It's only if you hold that there's comes in slowly, maybe it leaves slowly also, and they go into the 51st year. There's a havamina. But according to Rabbanan, say that it doesn't come in slowly, it just comes in on Yom Kippur, so there's no reason to think that it would extend into the 51st year. So you don't need a pasuk to tell you that only the 50th year. Why should you think it's the 51st? So the pasuk is extra. That's the Morris Kash on the top. Rabbanan, what are they going to do with this pasuk of Yovel hi? The answer is Shnas Chamishim Atamona V'Atamona Shnas Chamishim V'Achas. So I think it's a little bit misleading. I mean, confusing, whatever the word is, vague. That this word Chamishim V'Achas is not to be read 51. Shnas Chamishim V'Achas doesn't mean the 51st year. On the bottom of the page, let's go back a second. The bottom of the page, the last words, Yetam Mekadesh Shnas Chamishim V'Achas means you don't count the 51st year. That's good. But then on top of the page, it's read different. Put a comma after the word Chamishim. Yatamon Shnas Chamishim ve'achas. Means on the 50th year, don't count it to be both the 50th and the first. Rashi says it. Rashi says it pretty clear. So you have to put a comma between the two words. And the point is that on the 50th year, you don't count it to also be the first. As the word's going to explain right away, the question is when you count the cycle of 777 till you get 49, then the 50th year is Yovel. Very nice. Then the next year, how do you count the next year? Means now you're going again, the Shemitah cycle starts again. After Yovel is over, after the 50th year. So how do you start counting? Do you count after that number 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Or do you say that the 50th year is year 1 of the next cycle? And it's going to be counting both for the 50th and also it's the first of the next cycle. That's the question. We wouldn't know. So here they tell you that you count the 50th year and you don't count it to be the 50th and the first. Means according to this Rabbanan, the year after Yovel is going to be year 1. And that goes against Rabbi Yehuda. There is a Rabbi Yehuda that says it differently. There is a Rabbi Yehuda that says that the 50th year counts for the 50th year, and it also counts as the first year of the next cycle, of cycle of Shemitah or Yovel, that you count year after Yovel to be year number 2 of the Shemitah cycle. So it's machlokes. Kamash Malan, the low. So that's why the bundle will say, we use the pasuk over here, Yovel Hi, to say that it's only the 50th year. Yeah, the 50th year is only, and it's not also the first year of the next cycle. That's the end of this Gemara. And what we have, machlokes, if Yovel comes in slowly, and the first 10 days is a partially Yovel, as far as sending away the Avodim and giving back the Karka. Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan says, yes, it comes in from Rosh Hashanah a little bit. The Avodim stop working, the Karka, the buyer stops eating, but it doesn't come completely until Yom Kippur. Then the Avodim go home, and then the seller is allowed to eat the peiros that are in his field. And the Rabbanan argue and say that nothing happens until Yom Kippur. As far as the psak over there, we do pass like our Mishnah, that it does start, this thing we said that the Avodim stop working and that the Karka, the buyer of the Karka is not allowed to eat the peiros anymore. We do pass like that. It starts from Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara said that even according to him, it doesn't go into the 51st. You don't say Moshe B'chol Kodesh. And Naga, we got a new machlokes also when based on the psukim over here, another machlokes that the year 50, does it also count to be the year 1 of the next cycle, or just plain 50 and then the next year start year 1? That's,
you don't know the answer yet?
That's machlokes. That's a machlokes. The Gemara says it's a machlokes.
If you do it that way, that 50 is its own year and the 1 is coming up, so then you're out of the 7th cycle from the Bris Ola.
True.
You every 50 years you go to an extra year.
Right. And that also would affect how we're going to count nowadays. Nowadays there's no Yovel, but we're not going to count the 50th year. But when we want to know when the Shemitah cycle is, do we have to also calculate if they had the Yovel as number 50 and it was pushed off 1 year?
There's no Yovel like now.
Yes, but then we want to know if we go back to know the Shemitah cycle years. If we have to go back to the days when they did keep Yovel and figure out that every 50 years you add on 1 in order to adjust our Shemitah cycle. Right. So the machlokes ain't paskin. Machlokes Tosfos and the Rambam, machlokes over here if you paskin that the 50th year counts for both, or you count 50 and then you count the next year number 1. That's machlokes Rishonim how to paskin on it. Machlokes Rishonim. What we do in mice, I think we don't, but we don't go back to figure out when they had the Yovel also. What happens to be machlokes? Okay, that's the end of that sugya. Agav, we brought in the issue about Moshe B'chol Kodesh, that we said that don't be surprised if the din would be that Yovel goes into the 51st year. Don't be surprised because we do find such a Moshe B'chol Kodesh. That's what the Gemara said at the bottom of the page. Just to scroll back a second, the Gemara said on the previous Amud Beis, Chesed Beis, the Gemara said Al Tatame Shavei Mosif B'chol Kodesh. Because of that, we're going to result to a whole sugya of Moshe B'chol Kodesh. It's the rest of the page now. We're going to go off the subject and talk about the subject of sometimes, not by Yovel, other places, we are Moshe B'chol Kodesh. There'd be a Havamin over here that maybe you are, but Kamashman that you're not Moshe B'chol Kodesh. And now we bring a parentheses from this word to the Mosifin till the end of the page is going to be the issue of Moshe B'chol Kodesh by other things. With the Mosifin B'chol Kodesh B'nadon, how do you know in other places that you add on from the mundane to the holy? You sanctify some of the mundane. The Tanya, the Choshev B'Kotzet Tishbos. This is a pasuk in Parshas Kisisa, and it's a very interesting pasuk over there. It's talking about Pesach and then Shavuos and Sukkot. In between, it throws in something about Shabbos, and it says, "Sheshes yamim ta'aseh molachtecha, v'yom tishbos, v'chavishu v'katzir tishbos." The beginning of the pasuk is talking about Shabbos, which is also interesting in itself. It's talking about usually it says Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot together, or maybe it says Shabbos before. Then it goes to Pesach. Then it talks about Shabbos. and then Shavuos and Sukkot. Interesting pasuk. Why is it throwing Shabbos in between? But the pasuk is even more interesting. And this pasuk where it says 6 days work and on the seventh day don't, then it says from plowing and from harvesting you should stop. Stop harvesting and plowing. Pasuk Shabbat is going on Shabbos, and it's telling you don't do malach on Shabbos. But it picks out 2 out of 39. There's 39 malachas. So why does it say after these 2? That's interesting. So Bekiva has a fascinating drasha to say that these 2 words is not talking about Shabbos, it's talking about Shemitah. Everybody mute, please. Okay, so B'chorish Uvakatz Tishbos, Rabbi Kiva says it's talking about Shemitah. It's not talking about Shabbos. Very fascinating. The pasuk itself is out of order, you'd say.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, almost there. Yeah. So Rabbi Kiva says, even though at the beginning of the pasuk talks about Shabbos, 6 days work, 7th day don't, but then it translates on 3 words about Shemitah, not about Shabbos. On Shemitah, don't plow and don't harvest. On Shemitah, on the 7th year, not about Shabbos. Fascinating drasha. Rabbi Kiva, and even that Rabbi Kiva is bothered that why do you have to tell me not to do work on Shemitah? I know you're not allowed to work on Shemitah. Rabbi Kiva, the pasuk doesn't mean not to plow and harvest on the 7th year. We know you're not allowed to do work in the field. So we know all these things already. It's come to tell you to add on to Shemitah. Add on to Shemitah before, add on to Shemitah after. Add on to Shemitah before, not to plow the field in the 6th year in order to make the field more fertile for the 7th year. And also in the 8th year, even after Shemitah left, don't harvest the fruit of the 7th year. So this is called Tosefes Shemitah. It's called adding on to the holiness of the 7th year. The 7th year has a halacha of Shemitah, and now it's telling you, Rabbi Kiva says there's a halacha to have Tosefes. And he says, don't plow in the 6th year if it's going to help for the 7th year crop, and don't harvest in the 8th year, that which grew in the 7th year. Rashi over here says that as far as the 8th year, the point is that the fruit of the 7th year have Kedusha, even though now it's the 8th year, which we spoke about the other day, that things that are Chanata during or the things like food that grew is going to have Kedusha, even if it grew a third in the 7th year, even though now you're taking it in the 8th year. But the point shot of Rashi that it has Kedusha doesn't fit into the Gemara so well. Taisus asks, Taisus on the few days, when Fagan brings it down, that here we're talking about working. The fact that it has Kedusha Shvius has nothing to do with working. There are 2 points by Shvius. We spoke about it the other day. Just to emphasize it again. One point is the Kedusha of the Paris, that the Paris become Paris Shvius. The other point is that you're not allowed to work the field. So once it comes to the 8th year, even if the Paris are Paris Shvius, but why not harvest? Harvest is already considered Avodas Adama. So I'm allowed to work in the 8th year. So that's what Taisus says. I think what's coming to say that the Tosefes Shvius means don't harvest in the 8th year, the Paris Shvius, because of this type of harvesting. Not because it has Kedusha Shvius, because it's a Tosefes, is an additional extension of Shvius into the 8th year also. Anyway, what does it say over here? That according to Rabbi Kiva, we learn how to Tosefes Shemitah before the 7th year and after the 7th year. Rabbi Shmuel argues. So Rabbi Shmuel says he doesn't want to read the pasuk like that. The pasuk b'choshev b'katz hatishbos. Rabbi Shmuel doesn't say it's talking about Shemitah. He says it's talking about Shabbos. Read the pasuk simply that it says 6 days work, 7th day don't, and don't do plowing and harvesting. And the question was, of course, we know you're not allowed to do malach on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do 39 malachas. Why should it say after these malachas? So he's going to tell you in Joshua why the pasuk singles out these 2 malachas about Shabbos. Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Ma'acharish Rishus, Avkotzi Rishus, Yatzek Ksira Omer, Shu Mitzvah. That the pasuk is coming to tell you that there are some ksira that you are allowed to do. The pasuk by Shabbos says don't do work, but it gives 2 examples. It's true. We know you're not allowed to harvest and you're not allowed to do, you're not allowed to plow. But the pasuk puts them together in order to teach you a drasha. Plowing, there's no such thing as a plowing of mitzvah. There's no mitzvah plowing. There's no mitzvah in the Torah that tells you to plow. And Rashi points out, even if you have to get the Omer, the Alachim, you have to get some kind of grain, there's no mitzvah to plow. The mitzvah is to get the grain. So if you have matzah, it's called matzah chorish, in a chorish. If you happen to have plowing already, you have a plowing field, so there's no mitzvah to plow. So when the pasuk says don't plow, it's saying don't plow, which is always going to be a rishus. There's always going to be a voluntary act of plowing. There's never a mitzvah to plow. In the whole 613, there's never a mitzvah to plow. But by Ktsira, there is a mitzvah to harvest sometimes, and that is Ktsiras Omer. The over there, even if you happen to have wheat that was harvested, no, you have to harvest specifically for the mitzvah of Omer. So the way the pasuk tells us that you're allowed to cut it on Shabbos, if you have, if what's going to be the case that 15th came out on Shabbos and the 16th of Nisan is on Motzei Shabbos, so you're supposed to cut the Tvua. Did I say it right? You're supposed to cut what came out on Shabbos. It came out on Shabbos. It came out on Shabbos, and you're going to cut. When do you cut the Omer? You cut the Omer the night of the 16th, the eve of the 16th. Yes, I think I said right. Did I said right? The eve of the 16th. So it came out on Shabbos then. So Friday night, you're supposed to cut the Omer. I think I got it right. That Ksiras Omer is at night, the night before the 16th. So you're going to cut the Omer, even though it's Shabbos. How do you know that you cut the Omer on Shabbos? Because the pasuk says, you should not on Shabbos. You should not plow and you should not harvest. When it says plow, it's talking about a plowing of a voluntary plowing, because there is no mitzvah plowing in the Torah. That's the kind of harvest that the Torah says you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, a voluntary harvest. But if there's going to be a mitzvah cutting, a mitzvah reaping, so then you're allowed to do it. And there he learns out that you're allowed to do Ksiras Omer as Docha Shabbos. See that inside? Rabbi Shmuel Omer is talking about Shabbos. That's like the plowing is going to be voluntary because there is no mitzvah ever to plow. So too when it says here, don't cut on Shabbos, it's talking about a voluntary cutting. Mitzvah, but the cutting of the Omer, which is a mitzvah, you are allowed to do on Shabbos. So there's machlokas how to learn this pasuk of B'char Shavachot Tishbos. According to Rabbi Akiva, you learn now Tosefes Shemitah before and after, and according to Rabbi Shmuel, you don't. So the Gemara so far is happy with Rabbi Akiva. We wanted to know what's the source that you're most of Mechol Kodesh, and we support Rabbi Akiva. But Rabbi Shmuel is not a good source because he says first he's not talking about Tosefes Shvius. So the Gemara goes on to ask, from where does Rabbi Shmuel know Tosefes? Rabbi Shmuel Mosifim Mechol Kodesh Minolei. How does he learn out? He's supposed to add on to the mundane, and he's going to learn out what we know about Yom Kippur and then it's Shabbos and Yom Tov. And it seems from the Gemara that Rabbi Akiva also is going to apply from this halacha of the Sefer Shemitah. He's also going to apply it to Shabbos and Yom Kippur. But each one starts from someplace else. Rabbi Shmuel Mosif Nechol Kodesh Minolei. How does Rabbi Shmuel know that he's supposed to add on to the mundane? Not for it says in the Brisa, it talks about Yom Kippur. It says you should afflict yourselves from the 9th day. So the Pashup Shat in the Pasuk means that you fast on the 9th in the evening. Pashup Shat means in the night. Now, of course, you don't do it on the 9th, but it means the 9th at night, which is already the 10th. We call it the 10th. But the Pasuk calls it the 9th in the evening. But the Gemara doesn't say it's, as a Pshat, it's okay, but in the Drash, it doesn't flow. They should have said the 10th. Because Yom Kippur is the 10th of Tishrei, not the 9th. So Yochel B'Tishrei, you might think you're supposed to fast on the 9th. At night. Maybe the whole fast starts only at night, only the eve of the 10th. Does say something about the 9th. Okay, you do start in the 9th. You start in the daytime. You do start fasting when it's still daytime. That's considered most of Mechol Kodesh. From here you see you're supposed to start fasting on Yom Kippur when it's still daytime. And that's what we do. We start the fasting earlier. The Gemara spoke about that the women who go till Shkia, they don't know. So Mutu Shogun Al Yomazidin, we had that sugya in Beitza. In the Yellow here it only says that you're supposed to add on to the fast before the fast. How do you know that you're also supposed to add on to the fast after the fast? Fast a little bit longer, Motzi Yom Kippur. You should fast from the night until the night. What does it mean? Until the next night. Into the next night means into the night. Me'erev means from before Yom Kippur until Motzi Yom Kippur. So that means you fast even to the night. You fast also at the night, even after Yom Kippur is over, continue fasting a little bit. And the Yom Kippurim, so far we just told Yom Kippur, before and after, but you only see Yom Kippur. How do you know about Shabbos? Shabbos is for 9, also there's a mitzvah to add on before and after. The Pasuk says, in the Pasuk Shabbos is all going in Yom Kippur, but it's extra words, so we learn it out. Other kinds of Shabbos, other kinds of times when you don't do work. So Shabbos, you also have Tosefes before and after. You started a Shabbos a little bit earlier, and you ended a little bit later. Yom Tov Minai, the Yom Tov also is a mitzvah to start early and end late. That's the whole pasuk. Me'er v'adev tishbesu Shabbatchem. Okay, son. Why do we look at all this? Whenever there's a mitzvah not to do malacha, you're supposed to add on from the mundane onto to make it holy. So we learned out from Yom Kippur and Shabbos and Yom Tov, and from here we'll also learn out Shemitah. Like we said, he also agrees to the Shemitah before and the Shemitah after. You don't plow in the 6th year for the 7th year. You don't harvest in the 8th year the things that grew in the 7th year. And also, the Gemara said before, you have Havamina Yovel also goes into the 51st year. Kamash Malan, then it doesn't. the Gemara just ends off once we have this new pasuk about Yom Kippur. What does Rabbi Kiva need it for? He knows already Tosefes from the pasuk that it says by Shemitah, and from there the Gemara seems to say that you can learn out the Shabbos and Yom also Yom Kippur. So he doesn't need this pasuk. Rabbi Kiva, also Rabbi Kiva going to use this pasuk for. He knows already he's supposed to start fasting earlier and then fasting later. And also Shabbos Yom Kippur, he doesn't need all these psukim. He needs it for the brisa that was quoted by Chia by Rav from Difti. What does he say? The Tani Chia by Rav Difti. It says the same kasha again. You fast on the 9th. Of course, you do Tosefes, but the pasuk is not telling us that. That you know already. The fast is the 10th. So why does it say to fast on the 9th? Tishi Basiri. That's Talmud Beis already. That the pasuk expresses itself that you're going to get reward as if you fasted on the 9th, even if you don't. And the dafka if you don't. That means you're not supposed to fast on the 9th. It's not supposed to eat. And the pasuk could have said eat on the 9th, but the reason why he called it fasting is because you're going to get reward as if you fasted 2 days in a row. So why are you supposed to eat on the 9th day? It doesn't say. There are different refarshim that we've shown him. Some say that it's a simcha, like any yontif, that you can make a simcha on yontif. You can't do it Yom Kippur, so do it before. Some say it's for the atonement that we're getting, so you make a celebration about the kapara that's coming, and also that you should have koch to fast on the 10th day, so you're supposed to eat before. Rabbi Yoel and Shari Shuba brings down all these two pshatim, but it's a mitzvah to fast on the 9th day, and if they eat on the 9th day, and it's called also Kilu Asana. So that's all finished. Came in all as a tangent. This whole Amud came in as a tangent because the pasuk said, the Gemara said that according to Rabbi Shmuel that we paskin that Yovel comes in slowly, it might also leave slowly, and don't wonder it's such a phenomenon. We do find it by Mosif Nechol Al Kodesh, Kamashman that you don't, that by Rosh Hashanah, when the 51st year comes in, it's over. It doesn't go into the 51st year at all. And just the Gemara brought in, where do you know the concept of Mosif Nechol Al Kodesh? According to Rabbi Kiva from the Sefer Shemitah, that it says, according to Rabbi Shmuel, you learn it out from Yom Kippur, where it says that you start fasting on the 9th, and it says Ribuim also that you also fast into the night after the fast is over, and also Shabbos and also Yontif. So we have Tosefes Shabbos, Tosefes Yontif, Tosefes Yom Kippur, Tosefes Shemitah, and Kamashman, there's no Tosefes on Yovel. We also had a machlokus. If the 50th year is counted also for the first of the next cycle, that's machlokus and machlokus v'shanu how you paskin. And one more halach we came out was that the Ksiras Omer is Zochar Shabbos, and that was a source according to Rabbi Shmuel. Tan Rabbanan, back to Yovel again. So we said that we spoke about 2 mitzvahs, but there are really 3 mitzvahs about Yovel. One is to blow the shofar, and one on Yom Kippur of Yovel, and one is that the slaves go free, and one is that the land that was bought in the past 49 years, it also goes back to the original owner. Besides the fact that there's a avodas karka, they're not allowed to work the karka, same way on Shemitah, they're not allowed to work the field on the year of Yovel also. This next sugya is going to talk about which things are ma'akev, which means, the way Rashi explains, there are 3 mitzvahs of Yovel, blowing the shofar, and the slaves going free, and the land goes back to its original owner. Those are the 3 mitzvahs of Yovel. And there's also that the year of Yovel is that you're not allowed to work on the land. So each one of these 3 mitzvahs is essential, that if they don't happen, then there's no issur of doing work on the karka. Means Yovel might only kick in.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. We're coming back again. Almost there. Yovel has 3 mitzvahs, and the Gemara is going to talk about if Yovel is missing one of the components that you're supposed to do, and you don't do what you're supposed to do, the Yovel doesn't happen. And if it doesn't happen, it means that there's not going to be the issue of working the field. And that's going to be the discussion. Now, it's going to be 3 opinions. There's going to be Rabbi Yehuda, and then Rabbi Yossi, and then later on, I'm going to have a Chachamim. Which of the 3 ingredients of Yovel are essential in order that there should be an issur to work the karka on Yovel. Tana Rabbanan, Yovel he. Yovel, afal pi shelo shamtu, afal pi shelo taku. Yechal af pi shelo shilchu, Talmud lomar he, div Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says that 1 out of the 3 components are essential. That means if they don't send away the slaves, they don't send away the slaves free, that all Am Yisrael, it seems that if anybody did it, maybe it is good enough. But if nobody sent away their slaves, so then the Yovel doesn't happen. And then there will be no Isser about working the karkas. Riyah, Ksira, B'tzira, all those things are not going to happen, Rashi says, if nobody sent away their slaves. But Shamtu, which means to give back the fields that they bought in the past 49 years, or Tkiyah Shofar, which is supposed to do on Yom Kippur of the Yovel, even if that didn't happen, Yovel still kicks in. Two things are not essential to have. Essential, the word essential, I mean to say that if you have it, Yovel kicks in. If you don't have it, Yovel doesn't kick in. So two are not essential. Afish lo shamtu, afish lo taku, it's still Yovel, and you're not allowed to work the karka. But even if they didn't send away the slaves, it's still, then if they didn't do that, then Yovel is not going to kick in. That's essential. Shalosh sholcho, if they didn't send away the slaves, so then Tamalom Mahi, that it's only Yovel if that happened, if they sent away the slaves. If they didn't send away, then it's not Asa. Yes, please.
Yeah. Where are you getting this pashat that it won't kick in? I learned it just the opposite way, that we are only looking for sources on the three inyanim because we don't need a source on Shemitah of Avodas Karka because it's Meforish B'Pasuk. We know we don't do that. But these three, we need Pasukim to be Machriya if they're essential or not essential. But you're making it as if it won't kick in at all, the thing that's Meforish in the Krah.
I got it from Rashi. Rashi says it over here that Afal Bikain Shem Yovel Alav Liyos Asa Bezvio Betziro Ksiro Kedechsiv Los Israel. That the pasuk does say beferish also. Rashi brings on the pasuk that it says Los Israel Velos Iksuas Fichev Velos Iksuas Ki Yovel. The pasuk does say that it applies to Yovel also. But and Rashi learns that the whole Gemara is only talking about if this is going to kick in, if the Isra of Zriya, Betzira, and Ketzira is going to kick in. There is a Torah Yevon that says that they also are essential to each other, that if one of them doesn't happen, the other ones don't happen. If the Shiluch Avadim doesn't happen, then there's no din of Shemitah, but he's a Chiddush. Rashi says not like that. Rashi says that the whole issue is if there's the Isser, Zriya, Betzira, and Ketzira. And that the Gemara says that even if they didn't give back the fields, even though they didn't blow the shofar, it's still usher to plant and to harvest and etc. But
which Rashi are you referring to?
I'm showing it on the screen. You have it on the screen? It's the 1, 2, 3. It's the fourth, fifth narrow line. Here it is on the screen. Okay, back to the Gemara. So if they didn't give back the fields and they didn't blow the shofar, still it's Yovel, and you're not allowed to work the field. But if they did not send away the slaves, then it's not Yovel. And Yovel means that it's not going to be also to plant and to harvest. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Yossi argues and says that the essential component is not going to be sending away the slaves. It's going to be the Tkiyah Shofar. Rabbi Yossi, everybody knows that there's a Ribu and Amir. The word Yovel is coming to say yes, and the word he is coming to say not. It's coming to minimize. So Yovel, that it does kick in the issue of planting and harvesting, even if they didn't give back the fields, and even if they didn't send away the slaves, Rabbi Yossi says. But Tkiyah Shofar, that's what's essential. You might think that even if they didn't blow the shofar, it becomes Yovel and they're not allowed to plant and harvest. So the pasuk has a ribu and a miyut, and the Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi are arguing, what's the miyut? Is it going on sending away the slaves? That's what's essential, like Rabbi Yehuda says, or like Rabbi Yossi says that the Tkiyah Shofar is the one that's essential. And the Gemara is going to explain each side. Rabbi Yossi is the one who explains himself, and that's the continuation of the Brisa. How come he knows to be Mamai Tkiyah Shofar? That Tkiyah Shofar is the one that's essential. And later on, the Gemara is going to go into Rabbi Yehuda also about his pshat. But this Brisa now continues Rabbi Yossi talking. Is a Ribu Amir. The word Yovel is coming to include. Even if they didn't do something, it's still Yovel. And the word he is coming to be Mamai. If they didn't do something, it's not Yovel. So how do I know to tell you that Yovel takes effect even if they didn't send away the slaves? But Tkiyah Shofar is essential. If they didn't blow the shofar, it's not. How do I know which one to pick? The opposite of Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe he's right that the Shiluach Avadim is essential and Tkiyah Shofar is not. So I'll tell you my svara. It's possible that there should be no opportunity to send away slaves. Maybe nobody has slaves. Maybe there are no slaves to send away. Slaves is something. If you have, you have. If you don't, you don't. Maybe nobody in Am Yisrael has a slave to send away. So it's not mistaber that the Torah is going to make the Yovel dependent on something which might not be in effect at all. But Tekiah shofar, there always could be a shofar. There's not going to be a case there's no shofar around. So it's more mistaber. If the Torah said a ribu and a miyut, that it made the issue on the Tekiah shofar, which is always going to be possible. But Shiluach Avadim, which is not always possible, it's not mistaber that the Torah said if there's no sending away of the slaves, so there's no yovel. That's one reason of Rabbi Yossi. He has another pshat also, the Varach, another svara to say that it's more mistaber that the essential one is Tekiah shofar, because Zu Mesurah Bezdin, Zu Ein Mesurah Bezdin. The Tekiah shofar is Bezdin's job, and they're responsible people. But sending away the slaves is totally, it depends on the people, if they decide to send away the slaves or not. It's not mistaber that the Torah gave it over to all the laymen. They should, their sending away slaves is going to be the criteria. If Yovel is going to kick in, it's probably going to be on something of the authorities. And Bezdin, they're the authority, they're the ones who blow the shofar. It's more mistaber that the Torah gave it over to them. So he said two svaras to say why it's more mistaber to say that Tekiah shofar is essential than to say that sending away the slaves is essential. The Gemara asks, why does he have to say two svaras? Why is one not good enough? Why do we have to have two pshatim? The answer is because the first svara is not foolproof. It's impossible that there's not one person that doesn't have a slave. Nowadays we don't have slaves, but in those days that they had slaves, so it's very far-fetched to say a case that there's nobody that has a slave. So even though I said that it's possible theoretically, but it's very far-fetched. But so therefore I'll say my second shot. That the reason why it's more reasonable to think that the Torah depended the issue of Yovel on the Tekiah shofar is because that's why it's given over to the authority of Bezdin. But Shiluach Avadim is given over to each person. So now mistaber that the Torah made it depend on that. So that's the end of the brisa, and only Rabbi Yossi explained himself, but Rabbi Yehuda didn't explain himself. Rabbi Yehuda is the one who said the opposite. He said that the Torah made it depend on the Shiluach Avadim and not on the Tekiah shofar. So he has to be explained still, and that's where the Gemara takes over. Bishloma, the Rabbi Yossi, could come a time. Rabbi Yossi explained himself. El Rabbi Yehuda my timer. Why is he dashing the way he does? So here we have to have the pasuk. The Gemara doesn't spell out the pasuk for us, but what does it say? It says shofar, shofar trua b'chol ha'atzechem, and then it says u'kruasem deror v'osechol yoshver yovel hi v'shavtem mishal achuz asal. So the order of the pasuk is Tekiah shofar, and then it says send away the avadim. Then it says this pasuk of yovel hi, and the pasuk of I'd like to have it on the screen, but I don't. Rashi does spell it out in the beginning of the Gemara. Maybe I'll scroll up to Rashi. I don't have it on the screen. The pasuk isn't spelled out over here. So here's the pasuk Rashi. It's Rashi on the second line. Second line. Vavarta shofar, and then it says here's Vavarta shofar. You blow the shofar, and then it says Ukrosim dror. Make the slaves free, and then it says Yovel he. That's how possible. That's the mamait is going to be this he, and then it says afterwards. V'shavtem ishal achuzaso. Where's that Rashi? V'shavtem ishal achuzaso. And that's already Rashi's in the third narrow line. V'shavtem ishal achuzaso. So
excuse me, I have the pasuk if it would help. I don't know
that
if
would help.
want to-
Thank you, please.
I think it's the right pasuk.
That we need more. That's shofar. Does it go further? Does it possibly go further? That's all.
I can look for another one. Let's see.
Probably earlier than this pasuk if they have an order. So it's earlier than the Gemara. The Gemara you're quoting with the highlighted red. So that's going to be later on probably. But okay, if not, so we'll go back to.
Okay, I'm not sure. Is this what I had?
Something. Very good. Yeah, I think this is good. Very good. Yeah, that's a good pasuk. That's okay. The color is okay. But here it says we do need the pasuk before. It also says shofar. First it says shofar. Put it on top of the screen. Shofar. Then it says drawer, which means going.
So this one, is that this one?
Yeah, shofar, fine. And then the next pasuk, after that, it says drawer. This is that slaves go free. Then it says this pasuk, this word he is going to be to minimize that if you're missing something, it's essential. And then afterwards, it says about the fields going back to the original owner. Shafta Mishal Chuza. So the fields go back. Shofar, drawer, Yovali, and then yeah, good. Good. That's what we need. The way you did it now is what we need. There's a shofar, and then it says about sending the slaves free. That's what drawer means. And then it says this word he, which is coming to be might. If you're missing something, it's essential. And then it says about the fields going back to the original owner. So Rav Yehuda says that it's what if you can leave it on, appreciate it. If you can leave it on still,
Okay.
maybe we'll do the Gemara outside a preview, and then we'll see it inside. It'll make it easier. So Rav Yehuda says the choice is if Yovali is going back, this thing that's essential. What's essential? Is it the slaves going free, or is it the shofar? So he says it's more mistaber that it's going on the thing which immediately precedes it than going on lifnei fanav. They're going too behind. Means here's the pasuk of he. The pasuk that says he is the miyut. Something's essential. Right before that it says the slaves going free. That's what's essential. But to say it's going back on the shofar and then to skip the drawer, that's not mistaber. It's mistaber that it's going on the pasuk immediately before, rather than to say it's going on the one two before. And that's why Yehuda says, even though we read reverse yad svaras, reasons in svara that it's more reasonable to say that the shofar is more essential, but the drush of the pasuk sounds like more that the sending of the slaves is essential. That's what Yehuda is going to say. And one more point, just to say, we'll see it once the screen is on already. We'll say it now. Soon the Gemara is going to say that there's a third sheet that holds that everything is essential: the shofar, and also the sending free of the slaves, and also returning the lands back to the original owner. And that's going to be the Rabbanan, which we didn't see yet. And the Gemara is going to say that the pasuk is Nidrash Lefanav and the Fnei Fanav and Maharav. That they say that the pasuk is dashing backwards and forwards, even at a distance. So both the preceding, which is about the slaves going free, and preceding the preceding, which is the shofar, and also what says afterwards is the drawer. As the Shafta Mishal Chuzasa, that the people go, that the fields go back again to the original owner. And they're going to say that all three things are essential. If any one of them is missing, so then the Issa of Yovel, that you're not allowed to work the field, to plant and to harvest, does not kick in. Yes, please, kind of.
You would think if you're waiting 50 years for this particular year, right, that everything is very, very crucial.
We have drushes over here with the drushes. There's a drusha without the pasuk Hebrew. We wouldn't say anything. We would say that crucial means that there's a chiddush over here. There's a drush over here that says that the Isser to plant and to harvest on the 50th year is dependent if they did the other mitzvahs of Yovel. There are three mitzvahs over here. To blow a shofar, besides the fact that you're not allowed to work the karka, right. There's a din of shofar, there's a din of sending the slaves free and putting the fields back. Right, and then there's the issue that you're not allowed to work the karka. You're not allowed to plant, you're not allowed to harvest. And the Gemara is talking about which things of these three are essential, that if they're missing, there's not going to be an issur to work the karka. So Rav Yehuda, the first one, he says that the drawer is essential. That if you don't send away the slaves, so then there's no issur of working the karka. And Yossi says that the shofar is what's essential. If you don't blow the shofar, then there's no issur of working the karka. And the Rabbanan are going to say soon that all three of them are essential. If you didn't blow the shofar and send away the slaves and the fields go back to the original owners, then there's no issur of Zriya and Ktsira on the Erev Shemitah, on the Erev Yovel. Thank you very much, Levi Yaakov. It helped very much.
Rav Yossi was the first two.
Just the Kia. So more inside now. Well, to the I showed the Rashi because it brings the pasuk, but Yaakov put it on very nicely. Everything's clear over there. So to understand Rabbi Yehuda, where is that? Ishlama, first water on the screen. First line. Ishlama Rabbi Yehuda should get to come at a time. He explained himself. El Rabbi Yehuda my time. What does he get it from? That sending away the slaves is what's essential. Amar Krov, and then it says Yovel he, Kasava, and he holds Mikra Nidish Lefana, the low Lefnei Fana. It's better to dash in the pasuk water. It immediately precedes, what precedes it immediately, which means right before it says Yovel he, it says about cross and drawer. That's what they're going to say is essential. But with all Lefnei Fana, not to go two psukim back, the one where it says about the shofar. So therefore, the Shiluach Avadim is the one that's essential and not the blowing of the shofar. The Gemara, before it gets onto the third shita, it just stops with the parentheses that everyone seems to be saying that the word dror means sending the people free, the slaves go free. How do we know that? Everybody knows that the word dror means freedom. How do you see in the word dror anything about freedom? Nowadays, maybe it's a partial word, but the Gemara is saying, how do you see the word dror means freedom? Mashma. How do you know that? From where's the mashma? The time you learned in the Brisa, the word draw means freedom. What is that word? Rashi says that means that you could live wherever you want to live, and you could take merchandise to wherever you want to take it. I think it means to say that the word drawer is like dira, and the word yovel, I think the word is actually yovel is like movel. Movel means to move. So you're allowed to move merchandise to wherever you want to do. You're free to live wherever you want to go to do business wherever you want to. That's just a parenthesis, so to speak, to say what the word drawer and also maybe what the word yovel means. But now the Gemara goes back to the subject.
Okay.
Yes, please.
I just looked in Rav Michal, and your pshat is correct in Rashi, but he adds one word that makes the whole sugya very, very easy. He says, "Sha'afim lo kaimu Yisrael mitzvah, whichever mitzvah of the three you want, tiskadesh shnas hayovel v'yenohagu bo isurei shviz." In other words, the Havamina is the chalois of the kedusha of shnas shmita isn't chal. There's an ikub in the chalos kedusha by one or all of these three conditionals, things that need to be done, and then because there's no chalos of the kedusha, you wouldn't have the isser to work the land.
Yes, very good. The Gemara continues. So far, the Rashi just mentioned two opinions, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. Which one is essential? According to Rabbi Yehuda, sending away the slaves is essential. According to Rabbi Yossi, that Kiyah Shofar is essential. He doesn't say where he gets it from, but there's a Chachamim out there that say all three. If you didn't do all three things, to blow the shofar, to send away the avodim, to give back the karkos from the past 49 years, so the Isser to work the land doesn't kick in. How do they dash it? That's what we saw on the chart, that the pasuk is going to be dashing preceding it, which says about sending away the slaves, and the fnei fanav preceding, which is about the shofar, and what it says afterwards is about releasing the fields. The Mars the Kash, and that's what we pass like the Rabbanan, that all three of them are making. And if you don't have all three of them, then the Isra of working the karka doesn't kick in. The Gemara asks the Kasha, what are they going to do with the word Yovel? It means is it Yovel and a he?
I'm saying, brother, there's Fanav, Fanav, Fnei Fanav, Acharav, that's all three of them, is that what we said?
Right.
Before the word.
It says shofar,
Yovel he.
and it says shofar,
Right.
and then it says drawer, then it says Yovel he. That's our part. Then it says afterwards, Shafta Mishalach Uzasa, to release the lands. So it's darshan before, and after. It goes in everything. And the kash is, then you don't need the reboot. There's a reboot for something. The pasuk said Yovel and he was coming to be Mamait, and they say the meat goes on everything. But the Yovel is coming to be Marber. Rabbi Yossi says that some things yes, some things not. So there's a something yes, but according to Rabban, there's nothing yes. Everything is no. Everything's market. So why does it have the word Yovel to be Marber? Something else altogether. That comes to tell you that the din of sending away slaves even applies to Chutz La'aretz. That even if you have a slave in Chutz La'aretz, also you have to send not only in Eretz Yisrael. The sending away this, of course, the giving back the lands, that's only in Eretz Yisrael. But the din of sending away the slaves only applies even in Chutz La'aretz.
That's one of the Rabban.
Yes.
Extra.
But Taisus points out that Rabbi Yossi agrees to it. We see it before that he says there's no slave in the whole world. Taisus points out that Rabbi Yossi agrees to the din. They'll have to have a different brusher for it. The Master Kasha of Aksiv Ba'aretz, it says Ukrasem Dror Ba'aretz. So Aretz means Eretz Yisrael. So on the contrary, how could you say that applies even in Chutz La'aretz? The pasuk seems to say that it's only in Eretz Yisrael. The answer is Ahubas Manche Noeg Dror Ba'aretz, not Chutz La'aretz, but it's Manche Noeg Ba'aretz, say Noeg Chutz La'aretz. That it starts in Eretz Yisrael. If you have sending away the slaves in Eretz Yisrael, then they also have to send away slaves in the Chutz La'aretz. If for some reason it doesn't apply in Eretz Yisrael, or they didn't do it in Eretz Yisrael, then it's not going to apply in Chutz La'aretz either. But the din of sending away slaves does apply to Chutz La'aretz. So we finished that whole sugya, and we passed like the Chachamim that all three things are essential. If you didn't have all these three things, so then Yovel doesn't become Aser Zriya Uvik Sira. Nowadays there's no Yovel because we don't have Kol Yoshveh in Eretz Yisrael, but when there is Yovel, so it's only if they Makayim the mitzvahs, the three mitzvahs of blowing the shofar, sending away the slaves, and releasing the lands, then it also becomes Aser to work the land. There is also a pshat that some Achronim say that if you didn't do one, the other ones don't apply. The other ones don't kick in. The other two halachas about sending away the slaves, but that seems to be a chiddush against Rashi. That was the Turi Yevon, I think. So we continue the Mishnah now, and it says Lentia that the first of Tishrei is also the beginning of the year as far as plant samplings, which means that there's a din of Orla for the 3 years that after you plant something, so it's also to eat. And we said that the year changes in the first of Tishrei. So even though you didn't have a whole 3 years, a full 3 years, once it comes the first of Tishrei, the first year is over. The Gemara is going to say tomorrow's sugya of how much you have to have planted it beforehand that it should take root. But that's not our subject right now. Here it says that when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, it's a year is over as far as Orla goes. Minalan, how do you know? It says 3 years, and that says in the Torah 3 years. But how do you know that the year changes by the first of Tishrei? T'chsiv, Shalosh Shalim Arelim, that then by Orla it says 3 years the food should be Orla, which means stuffed up, you're not allowed to use it. Uchsiv, Ovashana Revius, it says in the 4th year it becomes not the Revoy, and you machalul it, and then the 5th year you're allowed to eat it. But anyway, it says the word shana. It means the word shanim, we wouldn't be able to darshan. What does shanim mean? Well, how do you count shanim? But the word shana, we do know how to darshan. And since when it counts about shanim, 3 shanim, then it says it in contrast to shana, revius. So we know that the years are starting from the same starting point. And shana we know is the first of Tishrei. The other shana Tishrei, the Siv Rishis Hashana. We learned already before that when it says shana, we have always a Gzer Shava to learn now from Rishis Hashana. We learned that over there that the judgment of the beginning of the whole year is from the beginning of the year in the beginning of Tishrei. That's what that was the Russia before. So we know that's the first of Tishrei. The Gemara asks again, similar to before, Nisan is also called Ashana. They say but that Shana means Nisan. And the Gemara says the same as before, depends if it says Lachachi Ashana or not. The deer says L'chachi Hashana, and it's true. Never is going to say L'chachi Hashana, like Chodesh L'chachi Hashana, for instance. Over there, the more did Hashana, it means Nisan because it says L'chachi Hashana. But if it just says plain Shana, like over here, it says Shana Revius, so then it's going to be learned out from Tishrei. When it says Chachi Hashana, it's Nisan. When it says Shana, then it means Tishrei. The Gemara continues. The Gemara stops here. That's it. That's as far as we're going today. And just to summarize what we learned today, the first subject was about that, like we passed that the year of Yobel comes in slowly in the first 10 days. You might think it also extends into the 51st year. No, even according to him, it doesn't, because it says a pasuk, the Maradash, the pasuk of the Rabbanan use that to say that the 50th year is not counted as the first year of the next count. And that's a machlokis. Rabbi says that it is counted both the 50th and the first. And machlokis Rishonim who you pass like over there. The next point was about Tosefes. Agav the Gemara brought in the din of Tosefes. So there's no Tosefes by Yobel, but there is Tosefes by Shemitah. Rabbi Kiva learns it out from the pasuk that it says B'choshev B'chatzet Tishbos. Even though the pasuk is talking about Shabbos, those 3 words are talking about Shemitah. And Rabbi Kishmael doesn't hold it out. He has a different pasuk to learn Tosefes by Yom Kippur that it says to fast. Over there learns out that Yom Kippur, before and after, and Yom Shabbos and Yom Tov, everything there's a din of Tosefes. It seems he learns out also to Shemitah, and Rabbi Kiva has Shemitah, he learns out to these things also of Yom Kippur, Shabbos, and Yom Tov. There's a din of Tosefes. The List Gemara says if you don't need this pasuk because you haven't read the Russia before, so then it's learned out that if you're supposed to eat on the Erev Yom Kippur, and if you do, you get reward as if you had fasted. I got the one in between also about the Russia Rabbi Shmuel that Ksira Somer is Docha Shabbos because it says Choshev B'chasset Tishbos. He says it's talking about Shabbos only Ksira Shal Shus, but not a Ksira Shal Mitzvah. Adam at Beis we spoke about the 3 mitzvahs of Yobel. Besides, Ksira Somer is Docha Shabbos, right? And then Amud Beis we spoke about the 3 unique mitzvahs of Yobel besides the dinner of Zviya Lo Sizra Lo Siktzar. It also says the mitzvahs about blowing the shofar on Yom Kippur, and the slaves going free, and the karka being released back to the original owner. And the Gemara spoke about which ones are essential for the kedusha of Shvius to kick in, that it should become us to plant and to harvest. And we have 3 opinions. Rabbi Yehuda says Shiluach Havadim is essential, and he dashed because of the Mikra Nidish Lefanav. And Rabbi Yossi said that the one that's essential is Tkiyah Shofar. He said two svaros because it's not mistaber that Torah depended on something which might not happen because nobody has any slaves, and also because give it over to the authorities of Bezdin, not to every layman. But the Chachamim is a third opinion, and they say that all three of them are makiv nidrush lafanov, lefnei fanov, lachrov, and that's how we paskin, that all three of them are essential. If you don't have them, so then there's no isas riyah and katsira. Agav, in between, the Gemara also said that the word drawer means freedom, that a person could live wherever he wants to, and Yovel, wherever he wants to do business, he could take his chorah to wherever he wants to go. That came in Agav. Also, the din of Shiluach Avadim applies even in Chuslaris, as long as it happened in Eretz Yisrael, it applies to Chuslaris also. And the Gemara instead of drush over here, that Yovel and Riboy, it says even if you don't hold this drasha, there are other drushes that the din of Shiluach Avadim even applies to Chuslaris. And the last thing we just started was about Orla, that it applied, that the drasha of Shana tells us that the new year starts by the 1st of Tishrei, just like it says, Bereishis Hashana. Okay, Yasher Koach. We'll be back in about 8 minutes to today is what? Monday, Tehillim, as Hashem starting Sefer Sheni of Tehillim. Yasher Koach, everybody. Thank you.